Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Jake with Athlete Well Centers, and today we are going to talk about some really key things about what your doctor is potentially missing when we go through blood work. This is something we talk about with a lot of our patients, and it's a really key thing because a lot of people come into us and they say, I've been to my doctor or however many specialists or anything like that, and they basically leave the visit with the doctor saying, nope, you're fine. I can't do anything. I'm not allowed to treat you. There's nothing going on. And yet you go into the doctor's office initially because you feel horrible. You're not sleeping well. You can't eat well. You're having mood swings. Your energy is tamed. You have skin issues. You have digestive issues. But all of a sudden you come back and the doctor says, oh, no, your blood work's fine. The even bigger problem is sometimes what we start seeing is all of a sudden you'll say, okay, I know I'm not fine. I go to the doctor's office. I get a copy of my blood work, and I can even see some high or low values. But the doctor says, well, there's not enough of them. Just wait until it gets worse. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do different and why it's so important to look at blood work different. Because there's actually an enormous amount of information that you can glean from blood work. And how we can actually start seeing disease processes happen way before it's the final end, the final call. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through basically just understanding patterns. A lot of times I've had a previous career in medical diagnostics research and development, and I had the opportunity to teach at a few seminars and actually teach doctors and people how to interpret lab work and what is the depth behind it. So that's what I'm going to go through you today, is just understanding the basics of why you don't feel well, and your blood work actually does show it. You just have to understand how to read it a little bit different. So we're going to actually start, and if you have any questions, go ahead and post them below. I'll try and get to them. I'm just going to establish kind of a few basic parameters now, and then we're going to get into that you can actually start seeing some issues with your blood work as well. It's actually not as difficult as people make it think. People make it seem. But once again, if you're never even taught that type of analysis, then how are you ever supposed to see it? So it starts with what most people understand is the bell curve. Even if you haven't taken a statistics class, you understand the concept of a bell curve, that it's just a representation of a certain group of people. When it comes to blood work, it's going to be people that are your gender and your age. That's what considers the reference range. That's the population that you're being grouped with, is people your gender and your age. Now, when you go to look at any panel or any blood work, we have to understand it's all based off a statistical model. Okay? What people don't realize, and this is a really important key point to help put this into perspective, if all you're looking for is the high and the low value, you are looking for less than 5% of the information. And let me explain why this is the case. When you look at a bell curve, everything is based on what is called standard deviations. That's set percentages of when you fall away from the middle and what we call the mean. When you fall away from the mean, it's just a specific percentage of people. So one standard deviation between that is going to equal 68% of the population. And this is what we actually call optimal lab results. Because a lot of times what you're going to hear is, oh, you're not in the outside of the reference range, so you're normal. That is very bad terminology to use. You have optimal lab results, and that represents 68% of the population. That's going to account for kind of genetic diversity. That's going to account for different races. That's going to account for kind of different lifestyles. In general, if you're in here, that's normal. That's healthy. And then it goes out to step number 2. 2 standard deviations is within that is 95% of the population. Okay? But guess what? You do not flag a high or a low value until you get to the outside of 2 standard deviations, which means you are waiting till you are the bottom 2.5%. Okay? If you are waiting to just get a bunch of highs and lows, it's the similar, I use the analogy all the time, is you send your kids to school and you ask your teacher, hey, how's my kid doing? They're doing fine, they're normal, they're doing fine, they're normal. And then all of a sudden they come to tell you, hey, little Johnny, he's getting 2.5% correct on his math test. And you're like, excuse me? Like, why did you not warn me when he was getting 50% wrong on his math test so we could do something at home and help him? And they're like, well, he was normal up until he was getting 2.5% correct. And you're like, that's not okay. Those type of statistics do not apply anywhere else in life. Yet it's okay for our health and our blood work. That is not the case. So what we have to understand is we can start identifying the disease patterns in what we call that functional range, okay? So I'm going to use one of the panels we run on everyone. It's the first panel I go through with people, and it's one of the fun ones I really like to discuss with patients. It's your anemia panel. A basic anemia panel has 6 values. A full-on anemia panel has something like 23, 27 values on it. But a basic one has just 6 values, okay? And so what's this going to be when we start getting into these? We're going to talk about these values real quick, and I'm going to teach you how to even look at your own anemia panel. And the reason I love asking or teaching doctors and patients this, because how much information can you glean even if you don't have anemia? Okay, so I'm going to hurry and write these up just so you can follow along with maybe blood work that you have yourself. So we have the Ferritin Test, okay, which is the storage form of iron. We have iron. We have UIBC. We have TIBC. We have a molecule we call transferrin. And then we have the last one, which is transferrin saturation percentage. Now, here's the fun part. The other question that I ask all the time is, why are certain panels established? What is the reasoning behind actually building or deciding the tests that fit into a panel? What most people don't even realize, and I was just lucky enough to be part of this profession previous to coming into alternative medicine and whatnot, is the way you actually build a panel is that every test on this panel can also be associated with a different organ or system. So I'm going to show you what I teach a lot of doctors and my patients is we look, number one, for the pattern. We're going to plot these values on the graph so we can really just visually see what's going on. So you ready? So let's pretend, I'll do some common ones that I see. So let's pretend when we plot out your values, you got only one of them that's like medically or reference range low. So you got one that's way down here in the reference range. The other ones are normal, but we now know they're not necessarily normal. And then you've actually got 5 or 6 that are all scattered around. Okay, so you go to your normal doctor and he says, well, there's only one low, not really that big of a deal. It doesn't really tell us a whole lot. You know, you're fine. But you're like, I feel horrible. Okay, I do not feel well. Well, what we can go in and see is we're looking for 2 different patterns. I'm going to do the first one in purple and the second one in pink. Okay, the second one is going to be big pink circles. And in both cases, you're only going to have one low value, okay? In both cases, it's the exact same. But once again, we're looking for patterns here, okay? Because patterns is where you start really seeing how blood work was designed. Okay, so the purple ones, you can see that there's kind of 3 stacked on one side of the curve, and then there's 3 stacked on the other side of the curve. So this is our first pattern we're concerned with, and this is called the seesaw pattern. Me personally as a doctor, I love seeing the seesaw pattern because that means your body actually cares. That means one of these values that's related to your immune system, that's related to potential stomach and intestinal health, or one that's related to liver's ability to build transport proteins. And I'm kind of giving you hints there. Each one of these tests, while they're part of the anemia panel, they're also can be part of other panels or other organs or other body systems. So when I see the seesaw pattern, when you have values stacked on both sides of the curve, that is what's called, that is the reason I love to see that, is because the body's actually still really trying, okay? our ability to help someone turn that around. And you're going to have potentially anemia type symptoms based on which one of these values are low. But what it does is on a normal anemia panel, I can actually start saying, hey, look, you're actually quite functionally high here, quite functionally low here, and low here. So what it does, it allows me to build a checklist of, okay, maybe you don't have anemia, but I've already got one check mark that you have an overactive immune system. I have another check mark that you're not producing stomach acid properly and putting hydrogens onto iron and stabilizing iron for absorption. I also have another check mark to say your tissues are actually being destroyed at a high rate, and therefore they're actually releasing the iron into the bloodstream. Or I can go in and say, hey, guess what? You're not packaging the carrier molecule for iron well, and all of a sudden that's going to allow me a checklist of areas that I'm going to look. Because every panel is designed, if that disease is not actually diagnosable within that panel, the whole purpose of it is to say, well, what can I glean? What information can I take from that panel? And then you go off and it allows you to have a focus on where else should I check. The other pattern that we start to see, and I'm sorry, the pink mixed with the black, so it actually kind of looks purple too, but we call it the slide pattern. And the slide pattern is you can have every single symptom of that diagnosable disease, but because you don't have enough highs or lows, you can't be diagnosed with it. You don't meet the criteria, and therefore the doctor says, I can't treat you. Well, guess what? You actually can. And it's actually better to treat you here, because what the slide pattern eventually says is the body has now stopped compensating. It says, I'm out. I'm just going to hold on and ride this show till the end. Okay? So the slide pattern, usually for us in the functional medicine world, it tends to be an indicator of this person's going to take a little bit longer to treat. Because a lot of people wonder where we come up with some of our timelines for treatment. And there's a lot of considerations that go into it. But this type of pattern really, really, really plays into it. If I'm treating a person with certain anemia type symptoms, even if they don't technically have diagnosable anemia, but they have a lot of the symptoms of it, and they have a history of iron utilization issues, what's going to wind up happening is the person that has the seesaw pattern, I'm going to be able to fix way faster. Why? Because their body's already engaged in trying to compensate for the value. And what the seesaw pattern also tells me is what body system is controlling this value? What body system is controlling this value? Because that body system is pulling that value out of place, pulling this value out of place. And what that tells me is the rest of the anemia panel is trying to compensate and right the ship. Okay, so this is where I already see that the body's engaging. And now I can really be very confident going in and fixing those two body systems and allowing the anemia panel to come back into normal. And we see it all the time. Then, but the slide pattern, once again, the slide pattern is where the body says, look, I'm having a really hard time going through this. I'm having a hard time rebounding. I can't quite balance this out. So what's going to essentially wind up happening is it says, look, I'm now just going towards the disease. And this is where doctors tell you, they can actually, a lot of doctors can see this, they're just not allowed to tell you. And so they're just like, well, wait a year or two, check back. And they know you have one low value. In about a year or two, you're going to have 2, and then 3, and then 4, and now they're like, okay, now I can diagnose you with anemia, even though you've had the symptoms for years. Okay, so this is a really, really important part. So when I go through someone's blood work, the one thing I really, really like doing with that person's blood work is I will draw out your anemia panel with you. I will walk you through what organs and body systems, and we start creating a checklist. And then what's more important to me as a functional medicine doctor, I do this on every single one of your panels. We run 9.5 panels on you. So we run a lot of panels, a lot of information. And guess what? If I see an overactive immune system, and maybe if you're almost never high or low, but if I see an overactive immune system indicated on 7 of your panels, guess where I'm going to start treatment? If I see your liver indicated, if I see small intestine and leaky gut type indicators on 5 or 6 of your panels, guess what? I'm going to start treatment there. I'm not going to chase your highs or lows, take this for your highs, take this for your lows. You're on 20 supplements within a year or two for the next year, or 5 or 6 or 7 medications. what we're doing is we're saying, why do those highs and lows exist in the first place? What body system is really, really controlling that fundamental value to be released? Because that essentially what a high or low means is you have a body system or an organ system that's no longer capable of controlling that value. Okay, so I know this is just a huge regurgitation of a significant amount of information, but this is a really, really, really important part of the whole functional medicine practice. Because, and I don't mean to slander any other doctors, but a big reason a lot of people come into us, they're like, I've been to 3 or 4 other functional medicine doctors, and then they bring their bag of supplementation. And they've been on like 15, 20 supplements for the last 2 or 3 years, and every single one of those supplements is a good idea. Every single one of those supplements or medications is used to treat a high or low value. But what we pull back and say is, why do those high and low values exist in the first place? Because ultimately what functional medicine is supposed to be is you start identifying as much of the root cause as possible. No system's perfect. We are not perfect. This is still fallible. It still takes a lot of interpretation. But this is a really important part of understanding, because me, coming from the lab world, this is what I was taught. This is how testing is designed, to be able to extract levels of information. And a panel exists, yes, to diagnose a very serious disease. But you can start catching disease patterns and catching why you're feeling like junk way faster. And instead of, like I said, going and chasing high and low values, the goal is to take a step back, grab your blood work, and all of a sudden start to be able to realize, look, I can catch disease patterns way sooner. Because I talk about this a lot, and Brittany and the people that are, and Jessica, that are in charge of our social media, they may not like me talking about this, but here's how I describe the difference between functional medicine and kind of traditional. Is if you take all of health from a 0 to 10 scale, our medical field is crazy good. I mean, really good at 8 to 10, okay? And 8 to 10 stops you from dying. They are really good at stopping you from dying. I mean, genuinely the best in the world. Where they lack and why patients come into us is basically this whole 3 to 7 model, okay? When a patient is really not feeling well, but you don't meet the death criteria, is what I like to call them. You don't meet that you have the full pathological state, we have to use hardcore intervention. This is where functional medicine comes in really, really well. And so we're actually trained to look at blood work differently. And like I said, I come from this totally different background to be able to understand why we build these panels in the first place. There's an enormous amount of information you can glean from blood work. And I tell people all the time, even a patient, and not to be degraded or anything like that, you can train a monkey to identify an H or an L on a paperwork, okay? That's not why we go to school for so long, is to just regurgitate what a computer spits out as an H and L. It's to understand where that H and L applies into the bigger picture. Why does that high or low exist in the first place? What body systems are connected to that high or low value? We want to help people in this 3 to 7. Yes, if you break your arm, or if you're in a full horrible pathological state and you're declining fast, I'm not the best guy for you. But if you've been dealing with something for months and years, and it just doesn't seem to turn around, and all of a sudden you hit this time in your life, you feel like you're just spiraling down, and yet you go to the doctor and they're like, look, I can't do anything for you right now. Technically, it's not their fault, because their training is focused on how do they stop you from dying. Our training is focused on how do I get you to not even get there in the first place, and how do I walk you back to health, okay? So it's a totally different mindset. That's really what we try and do. Like I said, we're not perfect, but the whole goal is to be able to say, we need to start looking at some of those bigger root causes and those more fundamental steps of what we've got to be working on. So sadly, I did not have time for questions today. I went a little bit deep into this. I really just wanted to take this time to help explain and teach you, even when you look at your blood work, we have to understand that there's more than just these outside ranges. There's a lot of information we can glean. The patterns really, really make a sense. So this is going to be what you come in when you come in and see us. This is what I really try and do with you. This is what all of our docs try and do. Dr. Ady, Dr. Sherry, Dr. Jenny, Dr. Steiner, Dr. Ben, the whole team here, our functional medicine team. This is the goal we try and get. We try and get to these underlying causes and then start walking you back slowly. So if you have any other questions, go ahead and shoot it to our Facebook, our TikTok links, or anything like that. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can, but I do have to run today, go see my first patient for the day. Thanks for hopping on. And once again, go ahead and share, like. I think this is information that more people need to understand. First of all, what functional medicine is, because I think it just gets a really washed out bad name. It's basically the interpretive analysis of how we go about analyzing a person's condition. So once again, if you have any questions, let us know. Appreciate you hopping on. Have a good one.